Thanks again for joining us. Ukraine has one ally less than what it used to have over the course of the war with Russia. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki today announced Poland will no longer supply the country with weapons amid a diplomatic dispute over Ukraine's grain exports. Poland has already sent Ukraine 320 Soviet-era tanks and 14 MiG-29 fighter jets and has little more to offer. The situation coincides with high tensions between the two neighbors, mainly pinned on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's remarks at the UN General Assembly, in which he said it was alarming how some of Ukraine's friends in Europe were playing out solidarity in a political theater, making a thriller from grain. Warsaw denounced his words as unjustified concerning Poland, which has supported Ukraine since the first days of the war. The two countries have since sought to cool down the row. Poland summoned Ukraine's ambassador over the comment. Poland's military hardware has been depleted by about a third through transfers to Ukraine, and Warsaw is in the process of replacing it with modern Western-produced kits. Still at the United Nations, European Council President Charles Michel has called on China during a Security Council meeting to help end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. China has abstained from votes by the General Assembly that overwhelmingly demand that Moscow withdraw its troops from Ukraine and stop the fighting. Its abstentions appear to reflect a bid to stay on the diplomatic fence over the war in Ukraine. Beijing believes that sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected, but has done so subtly supporting Russia.
I would like to thank you personally.
And staying with discussions on Ukraine, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva met with Ukrainian president on the sidelines of the assembly to discuss ways to achieve a peaceful end to the war. Now, this is the first time both leaders will meet face to face, and scheduling the meeting has taken months. The Ukrainian government had asked for the meeting after the two men did not meet at the G7 summit in Hiroshima earlier this year. President Lula has advocated the creation of a group of nations to mediate an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. And lending his voice to discussions on the war between Russia and Ukraine, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez doubled down on his country's full support for Ukraine. In his address to the General Assembly, Mr. Sanchez condemned what he called Russia's unjustified and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. He says Spain has been and will stand with Ukraine as long as necessary, but will also work actively to achieve a lasting peace that restores the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine and allows the Ukrainian people to freely decide their own destiny. He also praised EU efforts since the start of the war, saying some wanted to caricature the continental body as a clumsy giant incapable of defending itself with real determination, emphasizing that Spain does not accept that anyone should attack the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. And let's go proper to the war in Ukraine. This video that you're about to see on your screen was released by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, showing firefighters extinguishing a blaze in a Kyiv neighborhood after Russia launched its biggest missile attack in weeks on the capital. Loud blast rocked Kyiv and the surrounding region as dawn was breaking. This happened very early this morning. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said 7 people, including a 9-year-old girl, were injured. Missile debris fell in the city center, an infrastructure facility, and several non-residential buildings were damaged. Now, the Russian attack in Kyiv was its biggest in weeks, not just on Kyiv, but across Ukraine. At least 18 people were wounded and facilities were damaged, causing power cuts. Shocked residents of the Ukrainian capital were left surveying wrecked homes, a collage, and a drinks factory. They spoke of explosions and hearing screaming and crying as the missile struck. Partial power cuts were reported in 5 Ukrainian regions in the west, center, and east, bringing back memories of a Russian air campaign on critical infrastructure last winter that caused sweeping outages for Ukrainian civilians. Meanwhile, at least 11 people were injured in an attack on the Ukrainian city of Cherkasy this morning. Rescuers were digging in the rubble of a hotel and a residential area nearby that were hit by a wreckage of a downed Russian missile. As we mentioned before, the attacks by Russia today knocked facilities across the country, including power. Grid operator Ukrenergo said it was the first Russian attack on power infrastructure in 6 months and reported damage to facilities in western and central regions. Another area badly hit in the attacks by Russia this morning was Kherson. An apartment block was badly damaged. According to Regional Governor Alexander Prokhodin, on the Telegram messaging app that 2 men aged 29 and 41 who were inside a dormitory were killed in the attacks. The Russian attacks today are said to be its biggest in weeks across Ukraine, pounding energy facilities in what officials say appears to be the first salvo in a new air campaign against the Ukrainian power grid. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today met with U.S. lawmakers at the Capitol as Republican skeptics question whether Congress should approve a new round of aid for his country despite slow progress fighting Russian invaders. Mr. Zelensky traveled to Washington after seeking to shore up international support at the United Nations on a cross-town blitz that includes meetings with U.S. President Joe Biden and military leaders at the Pentagon and an address in the evening at the National Archives Museum. Mr. Zelensky was expected to meet with leaders of the Republican-led House of Representatives and House National Security Committees before a private session with the full U.S. Senate. Let's get more on the situation. The VOA's Anna Chernikova is in key for us. Hello, Anna. It's been a while.
Yeah, hello. Good evening.
Right. So what do Ukrainians make of President Zelensky's outing at the UN General Assembly?
Well, it's definitely one of the most important events that could possibly President join, and of course he went there physically, which is quite difficult in this time, and he's not doing this quite often. So it was definitely a very important event to join, and for Ukraine to be represented by the president, and definitely there were a lot of expectations to hear other countries and the speeches of leaders of other countries, particularly Ukrainians, were very following this event to hear what the allies have to say and also what those opposing and supporting Russia have to say.
And, you know, he's meeting with the U.S. Congress today. Are there any hopes that there will be a positive outcome?
Well, definitely, there are a lot of hopes for that, and this is the main hope that the financial side of this would be successful. Let's put it this way: we hear that that President Zelensky had already had a speech, and that there is already a reaction to his speech, and what we hear that he asked for continuous support, financial support, and arms support, supplies, more supplies of the weapons and military equipment. And according to some sources, it was said that President Zelensky had also conversation with the congressman, and that apparently it was quite okay. But again, we will see what would be the final and official result of those talks and of his meeting with representatives in the U.S. But definitely Ukrainians hope that support will continue, because without support will be quite difficult and very tough to continue this battle and to continue this counteroffensive.
And in a blow to Ukraine, Poland has announced it's withdrawing support for the country. How do Ukrainians interpret this, and will it impact on the war with Russia?
Well, I should say that it's still not clear, and it's still not a final decision by Poland, and not final reaction from Ukraine. As it looks, Ukraine and Poland are trying to find the way, and are trying to find certain balance and certain, certain positions that would be okay for both sides. We also have confirmation that Minister of Agriculture of Ukraine and his colleague from Poland had conversation as well. And they agreed that they will try to find a consensus, and they will try to find the way that both countries would be good and positive about the future of this grain deal. First of all, I mean, not grain deal, but grain experts, and also other questions, including Polish support. So for the moment, there is this misunderstanding, and we can put it this way, a conflict between Poland and Ukraine in terms of grain export. But again, it looks like it is a chance that still both countries will find a way. At least there are a lot of hopes here in Ukraine, because because definitely people and government understand that Poland has been a huge supporter, friend, and ally. So it looks like it's still not a final decision yet taken by both countries.
And the attacks this morning, which are Russia's major offensive against Ukraine in weeks, give us a clearer picture of what the damage is like. I know major infrastructure were hit, such as, power infrastructure, which caused cuts. But give us, a more detailed picture of what things are really like at this moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was one of the biggest attacks in this past months, I should say, and first time in 6 months the attack was targeting energy infrastructure. Ukraine is getting ready for intensifying attacks on energy infrastructure by Russia as winter is coming and heating season is coming, but this yet was the first one to happen in quite a long time, in half a year. In terms of the attack, it really was really covering the whole country. So damages and heats were reported from different regions: north, south, east, west, central part of the country. The city of Kyiv was also, the capital was also under the attack. What we know for now is that there are damages of private buildings, of private areas, of residential areas, also, as we already said, energy infrastructure, as well as industrial areas and industrial facilities, the hotel, and in one of the regions. So well, attack was quite it was quite damaging and quite bad. At least 11 people were reported injured, and I'm sorry, at least 18 were reported injured, and across Ukraine. And for the moment, we still don't have the final numbers, of course. So So this is what we have for the moment, and in total there were 43 missiles launched by Russian forces, and 36 of those were destroyed by Ukrainian air defense.
And but these attacks come in, close to winter, as you just mentioned. Winter is approaching. Attack hasn't happened to such a major attack hasn't happened in weeks. How hopeful are Ukrainians that the war will end in their favor?
Well, for Ukrainians, it's no other way, because for Ukrainians see it as if there is no victory, then it's no future for them, for their country, and definitely there is the only hope that the war would end in their favor, and this is why Ukrainian government and Ukrainian people are doing everything they can in order for support to continue, and in order to counteroffensive to be as effective as it could be in the conditions which are present. So I would say that hopes for that are pretty high.
Right. Anna, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.